90 as an offensive lineman, as a guard, center, and of course he was an All-American in Arkansas, and now works Saints Radio on WWL and does a pregame show prior to the countdown show, and does an outstanding job on that show with Tom Meneses. Please give a warm welcome to Steve Korte. Steve?
Well, glad to be back. Oh, this thing goes up. Can't just think go up a little bit here. Like some sort of lounge singer or something here. Okay, let me just put it there. I'm no good like that. Thanks for having me back. This is one of those times every year that Kenny asked me to come, and I enjoy seeing everybody and sort of visit with everybody. And you know, as I was driving in today, and it was, man, the one thing about football, you start listening to it on the radio, you start listening to some of these heads about it, talk about it everywhere. The only thing that's constant about it is change. I mean, it is so dynamic as to what's going on. And you sort of look at sort of how enamored everyone is right now with Tim Tebow and the stuff that's going on with the NFL with that guy, and how fun it is to sort of watch that guy. And as a guy that's the complete dichotomy of what you would think an NFL quarterback is supposed to be by our own definition of sort of what they've become. But this guy is somehow, he struggles to throw the football, but somehow, some way, he's a really good football player that happens to play the quarterback position, but he's not really a quarterback, if you can figure that out. So it's pretty fun to watch him, but it's inspiring to kind of watch a guy like that and kind of understand that he is sort of, that whole team is sort of bought into him, and it's fun to watch. But whether that's sustainable or not, you know, we'll see. But it certainly is fun to watch. But you know, the one thing I kept thinking about also was, you know, football is so much for the now, because you think about, you know, just case in point, when I got here with the Saints in '83, I didn't really pay too much attention to what was happening in the National Football League while you're playing college football. You really don't have time to, and the last thing you're doing on Sunday is watching, you know, pro football. Most guys are out doing what they need to do because Saturday was a full day. And I got here, and really there was sort of this kind of weird attitude that the Saints were sort of a talented team with some pretty good players, but really weren't expected to do very good, and the past had been kind of crummy, and it was kind of a strange thing because it didn't have much with me being here, but we started to have some pretty good seasons, and I realized that how close you are in this game between the have-nots and the haves is really just splitting hairs in that league. And really that sort of lives by today as well. I think that a lot of times you can sort of look at up and down teams and sort of what records are, and it really doesn't matter what those records are, that those teams are so close now and sort of what they do. But you know, it's the same point when I came down, and I came from Arkansas, and we weren't in the SEC at the time. We were still in the Southwest Conference. And I really didn't know too much about LSU. Played with some of the guys at the Senior Bowl, but really didn't know who they were. Back in the 80s and late 70s, really Georgia and Alabama were really two of the big, those were sort of the SEC schools that were really sort of the pillars of that, I guess, of that conference, if you will, you know. But you know, I came down and I tried to watch LSU for all those years in the 80s, and I was like, you know, I was teasing Hokie all the time, and Eric Martin and all the guys down here. I said, man, this team is really hard to watch. They're not very good, and they weren't very good. And then now you see them since probably the late 90s, 2000, they are really sort of one of the pinnacles of college football. So, you know, there we go, a change again. It's sort of this cycle that goes up and down. Of course, that doesn't apply to you, JT. You've sort of been there for, you know, 500 wins is something that's exceptional. And so you got to cut him out of the deal there. He doesn't apply to him. He's one of the stalwarts there. But anyway, I guess what I can kind of go through is a little bit sort of what I do, you know, is kind of when I break down, you know, the season as to kind of when we look at games and sort of, you know, obviously you kind of look at the New York Giants and then come in here with, you know, that's one of those teams that is really hard to figure out, because each and every week, if you watch it very carefully, there's certain teams they don't match up very well against, and when they don't, they look terrible. And then there's other times that they look like, well, that might be one of the representatives that ends up playing in the NFC Championship. That there's that much disparity between how they play. So, you know, to me, I think Eli Manning is completely coming to kind of a different. He seems like he's just a lot calmer, a lot better, a lot more productive quarterback than he has been in the past. I think he's always sort of had the talent. And I don't know if there was just sort of the surrounding cast that was letting him down, but he always seemed to sort of not be able to sort of pull it through at the end. And it looks like he's sort of done that. And then you sort of watch it and you're not so sure if that's the case. Now, their offensive line isn't playing real well. And if that happens, then you really don't have much of a shot anywhere. The guys that you thought were pretty good players now become pretty ordinary level players. I think he's got some great tools around him with Nix and Victor Cruz and Manningham and those kind of guys. But hey, if you can't get the ball to him, then really it's for nothing. I think they've got great short yardage backs, but they've been hurt a lot lately. I don't think that this guy Jacobs is a guy that they can lean on all game long, unless in fact they've seen something in the Saints defense that they feel like they can look at and expose. So if you look at sort of what we've kind of got going on, I think if number 9, if you can keep him upright, this game is so driven by the quarterback, and it's such a quarterback-focused game. You always have a shot with him in every single game. You notice that we have a shot with him, and it's kind of funny because you talk about how this game is such a quarterback-driven league, but then if you talk to coaches or when coaches talk about football, especially defensively, or sort of encapsulating the whole thing, they either have to, they say, hey, we're going to make a steady diet out of running the football, and we have to be able to stop the football to win this game. Well, that's 180 degrees from being pro quarterback for everything. So therein lies the difference, and that's what I think is fun with it, because the matchups, and I think a lot of times people look at matchups and they realize, they look at maybe statistics or something like that, and they try to break things down that way. But I think when you start matching up defensive ends against tackles, and you start matching up interior 2 techniques and 3 techniques and shade nose tackles and things like that against the interior 3 of an offensive line, that's really where the game is won and lost, because they can affect the outcome so dramatically from that position. But nobody watches that, or very few of us watch it. I watch it, and I'm probably a little disjointed because of that, but that is sort of where you can sort of almost tell if a team that doesn't match up well against certain people. And so, I don't know, I just feel like that because the Saints defense is sort of beginning to hit stride a little bit, and I know we haven't getting a lot of pressure with them just to start down 4. We've always had to use sort of a blitz or a combination thereof to sort of get pressure with the dogs in the middle and things, but I don't think that New York's offensive line right now is going to match up very well against us, and I think that's a good thing. So that's kind of what I see happening today, and so we'll try to figure it out. We've always matched up pretty well against them in the past, and for some reason the Saints play really good at home, and this year they don't play as well as we'd like to on the road. I think anytime you get to sort of this time of the year, I think it's important to play well on the road and to run the football, and if you can't, well, it'll yet be determined. So I'll sort of leave it at that. I'm on 4 hours before game time on WWL. You can catch me there, and you'll probably hear a lot of what I'm saying right now. It's been repeated in other ways, but that's how it is right here. So I'll take some questions or anything you'd like to ask at this point about the game or anything else.
Hey, Steve, with you being a former offensive lineman, what do you think about that center, Cruz, what was the real story behind that? I mean, for him just to give up in the middle of the season, it's kind of weird.
I never did talk to him and kind of figure out the reason why he didn't leave Chicago, and or Chicago didn't want to sort of keep him married, if you know what I'm saying. A lot of times with a guy, especially when he plays as long as he has, and he's played at a high level. I watched the guy for years, and he was a great player. And he begins to sort of lose a little bit of his enthusiasm or his drive for the game. A lot of times that can be sort of reignited, if you will, if he goes to a different environment and he's around different people and they're able to use him for his experience and whatnot. And a lot of times that will sort of revitalize a guy. But I think what happened to him was he thought that might be the case. He came to a winning program, if you will, thinking that maybe that love that he was lacking, or that desire or that drive, that maybe somehow that could be rekindled down here amongst different people in a different environment. And I think he found out that maybe that wasn't the case, and maybe he'd grown tired of the game. And I think so, in my mind, I think he did the right thing by, and the manly thing, if you will, by saying, you know what, I'm not going to steal from these people and take up a roster spot if I'm not really ready for this game. All I'm going to do is get somebody hurt, and I'm not enjoying it, and it's like going to work every day. You shouldn't have to feel like that.
Well, with that being said, isn't the Saints offensive line now healthy for the first time this year, pretty much?
Well, you know, coming off this long of a bye, you would hope that some of the minor stuff that would be bothering guys, because I can tell you that there's somebody bothered, and they've got something. They've either got an ankle or a low back or knees or a combination of all those things. So that time off, I think rest is really underrated, especially during this time of the year. I think if you can get guys out there, get them practice, get them off the field, study it mentally, take your mental reps, be sharp that way. I think a lot of times that is actually more beneficial a lot of times than drilling guys and keeping them on the field and getting their legs tired, because that's not going to do anybody any good. Anybody else? That's it. Good enough, thank you.